If you were to list one area that real world evidence has been used and has really improved patient outcomes, really the shining star of real world evidence research, what would that be?
Uh, I think we got a bad connection here, Patty. I don't have an answer.
Okay.
I've not seen. Now there, it's a really good question because it's something that I haven't really done a lot of research on. But that is a great question to ask and a great answer to be able to use in demonstrating to the general public and to all the stakeholders around that this stuff is for real.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't really have a great answer for that. I don't know that real world evidence is going to trump evidence coming out of an RCT as far as drug efficacy. But as far as it being used in the real world with patients that would have been excluded perhaps from clinical trials, it's vital. It's of vital importance. So we need those examples. I'm embarrassed that I don't have one for you.
Many years ago, I began my career as a product manager in organ transplant. And it was that particular job that eh, that increased my interest in health economics because I was managing Sandimmune or cyclosporin, which was the most expensive drug in the world at the time. It was being sold for the extremely high price of $8,000 a year. And, Congress had the foresight, because transplant was reimbursed by Medicare, had the foresight to request that any transplant patient, that their outcomes be monitored. It wasn't said that way, but there was essentially an organ transplant registry set up, probably one of the earliest examples. And it was through that research, when I was a product manager, that we began seeing that clinicians were lowering the dose on a milligram per kilogram basis for patients in order to save money. And then we began seeing rejections of those organs at a higher rate than was anticipated, than our clinical trials demonstrated. And so we were able to utilize that registry, and through chart review, the old antiquated approach to prior to EMRs, through chart review, we were able to see that those that were rejecting were falling below a threshold of dosage. And through that, we then used it to run a clinical trial to demonstrate appropriate dosing. So to me, that was a really fine example of how Congress had foresight to ask for data to be collected to validate whether or not their expenditures were delivering what they had hoped. And the medical establishment was working right along with Congress and with the manufacturers to collect data to better deliver better care to patients. And that happened in 1987.
Well, that's a great example, Patty, and I think again it just points out that there are a lot of people involved here. There's governmental authorities, there's regulatory authorities, there are payers, there are clinicians, there are patients, and I will say that the common thread of every pre and post approval observational study and registry that I've done over the years, and there's been one or two, is that we are looking to develop evidence, be able to really put things in perspective. Again, the price, we're typically not capturing pricing information per se, but we're capturing information that could provide perspective on the price tag, on appropriate use versus, again, what lies beneath the surface, the implications of inappropriate dosing or inappropriate uses. This is a great vehicle for really educating everybody along the way, those different stakeholders, as to the impact of appropriate and inappropriate use. So that's a great example. And again, that's part of every program that I've been involved with. In particular, every prospective program. Now, data is getting better and better, and the quality of data, even though we're not systematically capturing patient-reported outcomes yet. Maybe one day we will. But right now, the quality of data is pretty good. But you can't what I tell a lot of clients is you can't engage with a database. And if your goal is to engage with clinicians and really inform them what's going on, there's really no better way to do it than a prospective initiative that engages them, that really allows them to roll up their sleeves and better understand how they're stacking up their performance and using a particular product, or a patient's performance is stacking up relative to the aggregate. Clinicians, only see what's in their practice, and frankly, not all that systematically either these days.
This is just an aside, but I'm also really encouraged with the importance of real world evidence in addressing some of our limitations that clinical trials have with respect to diversity and equity. I think that's a really important contribution to the field of medicine. So.
It's huge, and again, I don't want to be cavalier or diminish the importance of it. It's of critical importance. We need to, whenever we're doing a study, we should be cognizant of epidemiology, and we should also be cognizant of the limitations that I mean, again, access to medicines and access to treatment is something that we really should encourage to be as inclusive and equitable as possible. So, as I mentioned before, there are a lot of reasons why certain patients would be excluded from a randomized clinical trial. They're too noisy. They maybe have all sorts of comorbidities and using concomitant meds. But the reality is that is the real world.